Welcome back to another edition of Mortgage Chicks with Hot Tips. I'm Diana Harvey.
I'm Elizabeth Hull.
I'm Kim Hairstead.
I'm Cindy Walker.
And I'm Stacy Van Skank.
Today we're going to be talking about some of the recent pitfalls that we've seen that's caused a little mortgage hiccups. Before we get started, we want to remind you to be sure to like, subscribe, and share to our podcast so you can see them regularly.
And remember to email us with any topics or questions at mortgagechicks@vandykmortgage.com.
So today we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls in getting mortgages, but we're also going to talk about some recent changes and things that you need to be aware of. So let's start with some of the recent changes, because there's some things that have happened recently that have been kind of big changes in the mortgage world. Let's start with the appraisals and the new contracts. Cindy, can you bring us up to date with that change?
Well, I would love to, and I think we're all still learning this new contract. So one of the things that I've noticed is the loan commitment date on the contract. If it's left blank, I want to say it's within 10 days. And there also part of that verbiage is if the appraisal has to be in as well. That can be a problem, guys. We can get a loan commitment, conditional loan commitment within 10, 15 days, but we can't always guarantee an appraisal being in on that date. So you need to pay close attention to that. And one of the other things that we see come up quite often is homeowners insurance. We always stress up front, get your homeowner's insurance quotes. I even help my borrowers get a homeowner's insurance quote up front. I tell them, look, if you have someone else you want to go with, please, by all means, shop it, get quotes. But here's who I recommend. He always gets it to me quickly, and you can take it or leave it. But we just want to make sure we at least get a quote within the first week after the contract, because it can hold things up big time if you don't. They require a 4-point inspection if the home's older than 30 years old. And a lot of times things will come up on that home inspection, whether it be plumbing, whether it be wiring, whether it be electrical, anything like that. So those issues need to be addressed up front. And a wind mitigation is important. Wind mitigation reports are required, not required, but recommended. And when you get a wind mitigation report, it can sometimes save hundreds of dollars on your yearly premium, depending on if there's hurricane clips on the roof, different things like that. But it's just very important to get your homeowner's insurance quotes up front so that we make sure there's any issues addressed ahead of time.
So let's just back up a second on those two issues and kind of put it into a little different perspective, because one of the things that we see all the time is that they put the date for the approval, which initially looks great. They give us maybe 30 days, and that's plenty of time for us to give them approval, get the appraisal and all of that. But they're also getting inspections, and those inspections take up to sometimes a week, and then they're renegotiating the inspections with the seller, and then there's what you were talking about with the insurance, and then that brings up other questions, and then the next thing you know, it's 2 weeks into it, and we've only got 2 weeks left. And so it's not that causes a pitfall where you can't do anything, but we're already behind the game, and we already know that we're going to have to extend that date. So that's where that becomes what we call a pitfall, something to look out for. So since we're on the topic of some of those things, let me mention real quickly condo changes, because that's been a radical heavy sigh. That's been a really radical change, and I'm sure we all know about Champlain Tower South, the collapse in Surfside, Florida. Horrible situation. But as a result of all of that, there's been a lot of changes in guidelines that go back to what we have to look at when we're doing financing on a condominium. And that goes back to deferred maintenance, any possible unsafe conditions, special assessments, and reserve requirements. And I'm going to real briefly mention, I happen to live in a planned unit development where we've seen all of these things come to play. And it happened because we went through a tough time with COVID and all of that. The people that were on the board didn't want to raise dues. They didn't want anybody to have any hardship with that. But it resulted in some deferred maintenance issues causing special assessments, and everything had to be readdressed. And I'm just one person out of many that are experiencing this kind of situation. Can it still be done? Absolutely, 100%. But the financing may take just a bit longer. So we kind of went over some of the things that can take a little longer. Give yourself a little bit more time when you're doing these things. Other things we want to be aware of, though, especially this time of year, is property taxes. So Stacy, talk to us about that.
Property taxes, property taxes, property taxes. It is imperative that once people purchase their home and get the recorded deed, they file homestead exemption immediately. You have until February 28th, but don't wait until the last minute.
Right, do it
Even
right
my
away.
sister, my little sister, was in the business and completely forgot to file homestead exemption. And when she got her bill the next year, oh my goodness gracious, it's a huge impact, you know? Now up front, what we're gonna do is look at the current seller's property taxes, and then we're gonna do a tax estimate. We're gonna make sure we're gonna protect our buyers and make sure that when the taxes adjust, that they still can afford the home. A lot of lenders don't do that. We do that. We do that because we care and we want to put someone in a position to be successful. But if they don't file homestead exemption, they could be their payment could go up $200, $300, $400.
Easily.
Suddenly they can't afford their mortgage payment. So we at VanDyk, we will send a notice out to all of our purchase business at the end of the year to say, don't forget to file homestead exemption. But people just they can't put it off to the last minute.
Very good
Right.
advice.
And if they don't have a copy of their closing disclosure, they can reach out to one of us.
For
And, you know,
sure.
If we did your loan, we can absolutely make sure we get you a copy of that. So give us a call.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Kim, what are some of the other things this time of year that you want to kind of pay attention to?
Well, a lot of our buyers are self-employed, and I find a lot of people coming to me right now actually trying to buy a home and looking at their past tax returns, they don't qualify. They've written off everything. And we average 2 years most of the time for self-employed buyers. We're going to take your 2-year history and average that income. And when you write everything off, you don't pay the government taxes. Well, guess what? The government's not going to let you have a loan. So it kind of works both ways. So what we try to do is educate our self-employed borrowers on what to, not write off this next year, this coming year. I have clients right now, they're trying to buy a house and she just wrote everything off in 2020. And I said, for 2021, let's, pay a little more taxes so you can buy a home next year. So that's all kind of good. You want to talk to your financial advisor and you want to talk to a loan officer to make sure that you are writing off the right amount to get the property that you want.
Excellent advice for those self-employed people. And then there's some other things you can do to keep everything moving along on your loan and things going smoothly. Elizabeth, how can they help?
Well, I would say that the biggest thing a buyer can help us is to be present in the transaction. Meaning, when we ask them for an email address, make sure they give us an email address that they check daily, if not multiple times a
for
day.
sure.
Don't plan a vacation right in the middle of while you're buying a home. Make sure you're checking your voicemails, because there are people who are reaching out. It may not be us. We may have a processor. It could be the title company. It may be that homeowner's insurance agent because we're trying to get that homeowner's insurance in place for you. But the best thing to do is to stay on top of the transaction. Stay in communication. Return phone calls, make phone calls, communicate, and be involved in your own transaction.
Also, loan conditions, number one, they don't go away without being satisfied. And number two,
True.
they're not negotiable.
Absolutely.
These are guidelines from the investors. So a lot of times people, they think if they're just going to ignore us, we'll eventually stop asking, and that's not the case.
It doesn't.
And I promise that we do not sit up at night going, you know what? I'm going to ask this borrower for this, and this just because I want to.
No, and
We're not
typically
asking
we
unless
won't
we
even
need
reach
it.
out to the borrower. If it's a condition we may not agree with underwriting, we'll go to underwriting and try to specify, what our concerns are. So we won't even reach out to the borrower until we've addressed that with the underwriter if there's any questions. So if we reach out, it's typically because we need the information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we've done our homework before we've called them.
So what we've talked about today are just some of the things that can help your mortgage go along smoother. We've talked about changes to the contract to give us a little bit more time because we now need to get the full appraisal before the commitment is issued. And then also changes in condominium requirements, issues with homeowners insurance taking a little longer, and golly gee, don't forget to file for homestead. That's so important.
Huge.
Huge. Self-employed. Be sure that you analyze how much you really want to write off. Does it make sense to maybe pay a little bit more in taxes so you can qualify for a little bit more? And then, of course, stay engaged. Stay involved with the transaction. Help us help you to get everything done quicker. So these are just a few hot tips to help you avoid any mortgage pitfalls.
And remember, if you like this episode, please share, like, and subscribe to our channel.
If you have a topic you would like for us to discuss, please send us an email or any questions. mortgagechicks@vandykmortgage.com.
We also have a Facebook page, Mortgage Chicks with Hot Tips. Follow us, like us, and we'll send you teasers, and we'll also send you full videos on that site.
You can also find us on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.